Okay, hello, welcome to Critical Wade Theory. I believe this is take 6 or take 7 or something of my attempts to record. Anyway, I've got a movie review lined up, and this movie has a bit of a satirical edge. You ever watch something that feels like it could actually happen, and that's the scariest part? Well, today I'm talking about I Care a Lot, a 2020 dark comedy thriller from J Blakeson starring Rosamund Pike, Peter Dinklage, Eiza González, and Dianne Wiest. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, but I know she's been in a few Tim Burton movies, most prominently Edward Scissorhands. So this movie is stylish, funny, infuriating for some people, and way too real. Now, it is infuriating because some people they say there's too many plot holes in the movie or something like that. The characters are too unlikable. This is too unrealistic that this would happen, etc., etc. So here's the basic setup. Marla Grayson, played by Rosamund Pike, is a professional predator, a con artist who's turned the legal system into her own ATM. She finds elderly people, convinces the courts they're unfit, to take care of themselves, and she becomes their legal guardian. Once that happens, she controls their money, their homes, their lives. It's all technically legal and completely evil. There is a line early on where a dangerous and desperate son says, "My mother, I should be able to see her whenever I want." And that's when you realize this isn't a movie about monsters in the shadows. It's about monsters who file paperwork. And that's why I'm partly interested in having this as sort of a Halloween season episode review. I'm going to have more of those next week. I've got like 4 movie reviews lined up to fit in with Halloween, but this one's a little bit more tangential. It's not a conventional movie villain, but in many people's minds, she would be villainous enough. And there are some moments of tension in this movie that actually have it be a thriller, and it's actually, in my opinion, a little more of a thriller than a comedy, although there are some comedic elements too. And Marla's empire runs smoothly until she picks the wrong target, Jennifer Peterson, played by Dianne Wiest. She seems perfect, wealthy, no family, no ties, except she's not who she seems. She's connected to a crime boss, played with icy charm by Peter Dinklage, and suddenly the hunter becomes the hunted. And by all appearances, the crime boss is the son of Diane's character, or Jennifer Peterson. But that's not really the point of the movie. I mean, it does kind of hint at those family dynamics, but the point is, finally the scam artist has picked on the wrong person. So the film walks a razor line between comedy and perhaps even horror. It does have some of those elements to it. I don't know. You always get some people saying this is horror. No, that isn't horror, and there's a debate over what actually defines that word, but it's at least a thriller. It's satire, but it hits close to home because guardianship scams like this aren't actually fiction. And that's really why I think this is a good movie overall, simply because it reminds people that these sorts of scams are out there and they can actually happen. So in real life, there was somebody named April Parks, a so called professional guardian in Nevada, who exploited over 150 seniors. She drained their assets, locked them away, and profited off the system until she was finally caught. In Florida, a family sued after court appointed guardians held an elderly man captive just to sell off his property and won $16 million dollars in damages. And in Missouri, a guardian stole over $600,000 from an 87-year-old man, leaving him living in her basement. So, yeah, that's a very real topic. And I think some of the reviewers lose sight of that. So, despite whatever flaws this film might have, I think the overall benefit of bringing this sort of message to the masses is actually positive. So that's why I'm not going to give it like a really bad review here. If you think something like this absolutely could not happen, well, guess again. I gave you some examples, and I'm sure there are definitely some other ones out there. Maybe you can think of some examples yourself. I don't know. It's possible that somebody you know has been scammed. Or I suppose it might not be a guardianship scam exactly, just some sort of scam that left you or somebody else victimized. So I think this movie really does touch upon, the issues of elder abuse in the system, and also just that predators are out there and they're not always, wearing a hockey mask or a glove with razors on it, or what have you. And they can be, just as scary as a a boogeyman type of character, really, because they ruin people's lives. And it's a little bit of a reminder that the uh the villainscape out there is a lot bigger than just the conventional scary types of people you might think about. Not all boogeymen are quite the same, or boogie women, I suppose you might say in this case. So you hear stories like that, and I Care a Lot stops just being a movie. It becomes like a mirror for how society could be. And, when it comes to some plot holes, I personally think a lot of those are actually a little bit forgivable. So, like the movie Natural Born Killers is controversial, and part of that is because indeed there are some plot holes in that movie. For example, Mickey and Mallory escape from prison at some point in the movie, right? And one of the funniest parts of the movie is when Mickey says that they didn't, the authorities didn't care about, the person that they kidnapped, and that's why helicopters were not deployed. And it's definitely a plot hole, and they're expressing some self awareness of that in the movie itself. Natural Born Killers, and it's one of those things like I don't really care that much if there's like a little bit of a mess up or a little bit of even just bad writing, because if you just kind of shrug it off, it's not even that big of a problem. This movie definitely has some aspects that are like that too. Like a lot of people say that the main character wouldn't have survived that, or how would she outsmart, a Russian mafia uh, attack or something like that. And you get people on Reddit picking this movie apart here and there, and like with the movie Natural Born Killers, I think it's just a funny comedic thing. You're not supposed to take these movies that literally. It's more of a message based part of the writing. So obviously, like if we're going back to Natural Born Killers, I don't mean to get hung up on that too much, but my point is that obviously, if they did escape from prison, there would have been helicopters like circling overhead, and because you get that with even ordinary high speed car chases, even back in the 90s when that movie came out. So it is a plot hole. I mean, obviously, there probably would have been helicopters dispatched to catch them. And when it comes to this movie, there are some people who I think make a kind of bad critique of it when they say, wouldn't there be people who would, catch on and make sure that this main character actually, pays a price, ends up going to prison or something like that? But the message of this movie is that she was a real smooth operator with her scams. You know, she had the system worked out. She was very good at manipulating people. She had the right look. She knew the right words to say, and all of that kind of stuff. And when push comes to shove, you have to think that people like this are already out there. You know, they're already being able to get away with stuff, and partly it's because of how they sell themselves. They promote themselves as being on the on the right side and being there to help, when in fact they're really just there to scam you out of your money or your other resources. So tonally, the film is slick. There are neon visuals, razor sharp dialogue, a dark sense of humor that makes you laugh before you feel guilty for laughing. And Rosamund Pike's performance is cold, confident, and magnetic. She won a Golden Globe for it, Best Actress in a Motion Picture, Comedy, or Musical, and her acceptance speech summed it up perfectly. She said, "I bet it looks like I care a lot. Wow, I care a lot. I do." So that was a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek reference to the movie itself, of course, and the irony was delicious and exactly on brand. And you know the applause that I have for this movie is limited. You know, I don't think it's a masterpiece or anything like that, but I think it is pretty good. And you know that's if you're able to put aside your critiques and just sort of let the movie wash over you. You know, it's one of those sorts of movies that you just have to accept for what it is and sort of take off your, I guess, critique cap, or what are your critics cap. And speaking of which, the critics were split on this one. Some loved the boldness, others couldn't handle the tonal whiplash and tripped on its perceived plot holes, like I already said. But everyone agreed that it got under their skin, and it'll most certainly get under your skin as well, because it doesn't just question morality, it questions the entire system that lets a scam like this thrive. And I care a lot. It's streaming in February 2021, Netflix in some regions, Amazon Prime in others, and that dual release made it harder to track the full impact, but it found an audience in some corners of the internet. People couldn't stop talking about it. Again, it gets a lot of hate. You know, there are a lot of critics of this movie. Don't get that part of it wrong, but you know, it captured something about the modern world, uh, how greed hides behind paperwork, how power disguises itself as professionalism, and how easy it is for cruelty to wear a smile. And that's my main takeaway from this. Not it's even more than whether or not this was some masterwork or something. It was good, and I think it becomes better if you sort of really hinge on that messaging as one of its strengths. In a way, I Care a Lot belongs to a new wave of darkly comic films and TV shows, stories that blur morality and make us question who's really the villain. It's part American Psycho, part Black Mirror, but with its own sharp, cynical bite. And it's still finding new viewers, still sparking conversations about real world exploitation and how the system fails the people it's supposed to protect. So that's why I still think it's a good movie, even if some people out there trash it. And at the very least, I think it asks some good questions and maybe even hints at some answers. So yeah, I Care a Lot isn't just entertainment, it's like a warning, because sometimes the worst kind of horror doesn't come with fangs or with blood. It comes with a signature at the bottom of a court order. And that's it for critical this episode of Critical Wade Theory. I'm Wade, and thanks for listening. Remember, if someone says they care a lot, maybe double check who they're caring for. In some cases, maybe they're just caring for themselves.